In my continuation on the Illuminati bloodlines, I herewith introduce to you the Li dynasty. Now, Li is a family that originates out of China. And in order to understand how things work, I have to first give you an understanding of how Chinese names are joined. A Chinese name is made up of a family name, the surname, which is usually written first, and then comes the personal name. In the Chinese way of things, my name would be Scott Rebecca. Now, family names usually, the Chinese family names usually consist of one character each. And although there are exceptions like Ouyang and Situ, there are over 6,000 Chinese surnames for about 1 billion Chinese. Now, let's see, where do I want to go with this? Okay, the more frequent Chinese surnames in English-speaking countries such as the US and the UK, and also in Australia, are Chan, Lin, Li, Wang, Hung, Mei, Yang, Qin, and Feng. In mainland China, however, the 5 top family names are Chen, Li, Zhang, He, and Hung. Now, family names are more meaningful for Chinese in China than for Americans. For instance, the Chinese surname Li is very popular in China, perhaps not as widespread as Smith in the US, but certainly used as much as the name Brown in America. The Chinese who have the same surname have much more loyalty to someone else who has the same surname. For instance, 2 Chinese with the name Li would consider themselves relatives even if they were total strangers. And even if 2 people knew of no blood ties, if they had the same surname, it has generally been considered incestuous to marry each other in China. The Li surname has a long history which goes back to a specific person named Emperor Zuzan, who was the first Li who lived before 2000 BC. Now this is according to the Xingzhuang, which is the Chinese dictionary of surnames. The Li family has a long history in China with many stories. During the Tang dynasty, about 15 different surnames were given the honor of having the Li surname. Li Wan was the founder of the Tang dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 906 AD. His son, who ruled after him, was Li Shiming, and in their dynasty, printing and paper money were first introduced to China. Now, it's interesting that the Lis are connected to the introduction of paper money. As you will see as I go further in the video, they are still very much connected to the money. Now, in recent history, there are 3 Lis that stand out as giants: the billionaire and de facto ruler of Hong Kong, Li Ka-shing, Li Ping, the ruler of Red China, and Lee Kuan Yew, the president and dictator of Singapore. I don't know which of the Lis are closely related and which are not. I do know that the Lis control Red China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. They also have important positions in Taiwan. Now, if the various Lis which control these nations are related, then we are certainly looking at one of the most powerful families in the world. In terms of power, they would be just as powerful as the Rockefellers. They are also connected, it appears, to secret occult societies. But the secret societies which the Lis are major players in are the Chinese secret societies like the Triads, Hip Sing Tong, Black Dragons, Giheng Kongsi, to name just a few. And one of the reasons that they are not directly connected to these societies, although it is believed that they are, is because they are indeed of Chinese origin, and unless you are a member and speak Chinese, it would be very hard to prove or disprove. However, in my investigation of the triads, I discovered triads. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I think it's pronounced triads. I discovered that the Li family is one of the principal families which has controlled it. The triads is a Chinese secret society, which is something of a cross between the Masons and the Mafia. And it may even very well cross the line of P2 Freemasonry, except much bigger. The triads are not well known in this country. Well, with the big influence of the Chinese kung fu movies, they've become more well known than they had been in previous times. So let me just say that. However, they are more powerful than the Mafia. It is known that the Mafia was invited, in fact, to work with the triads in 1970. And at the time, the Mafia didn't like the triads' arrogance. However, in my opinion, the triads were not being arrogant considering how powerful they are. So for the sake of completeness, I will just list some of the Lees, past and present, that have been important triad leaders. Now, I have learned that Li Ka-shing and the powerful Hong Kong Lees are definitely part of the satanic Illuminati Lees. In terms of whether the Lees who run Red China are part of the Illuminati, I know nothing that directly connects them. However, there are clues that makes one wonder. For instance, why do the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds have such a cozy relationship with the Red Chinese Lees? This is something that would make you wonder. Why does it seem that the Prime Minister of the People's Republic of China, Li Ping, visit with the Rockefellers and other capitalists when he comes to New York City? If he is such a hardline communist, this is something that should make you say, haven't the communists named the capitalists as their major enemy? And then when we watch these men who are in the Illuminati, such as old Skull and Bones himself, George Bush, they treat the Chinese Lees with such respect and closeness, even when it was Li Ping that crushed innocent people at Tiananmen Square. It makes us wonder still. In fact, with the other pieces of the puzzle that I have in place, I do know that Red China is already cooperating with and is part of the New World Order. The only way that China could already be secretly part of the New World Order is for its leaders, who are the Li family, to be in favor of it. This strongly suggests that the Li family in China is also part of the Illuminati. And from what I know, from the range of possibilities, from them being only sympathizers with the NWO to them being outright members of the Illuminati, I would lean toward the latter. Now, there is Singapore. Singapore is lock, stock, and barrel NWO, New World Order. They went to a cashless society way before anybody else. And one of the Lee family, who spells his name L-E-E, Lee Kuan Yew, is a Cambridge-educated lawyer. He was a dictator of Singapore for decades. He has ties to the British elite. As an example of his dictatorship, Lee didn't like long hair on men. And so when men came into Singapore with long hair, he would have their passports taken away. And they either got a haircut or they went to jail. In 1959, when Britain gave Singapore its independence, the Lee family, which in this case was also spelled L-E-E, controlled the People's Action Party, which ruled the country. In 1976, the People's Action Party monopolized politics so much that they won all 69 seats for Parliament. Now, Lee Kuan Yew was placed into the all-powerful position of president in 1965, and I believe he was in that position until 1991. Singapore's leaders made Singapore very anti-communist during the Cold War, and when Nixon began his trips to win favor with China, Singapore began making goodwill political missions to China. In 1975, Lee's henchmen the foreign minister S. Rajanatham went to China and met with Choan Li. Choan Lai, not Li. Choan Lai was the mentor and friend of Li Ping. Now, the Rothschild and the Rockefeller families have very high respect for the Chinese and Japanese people in relation to some of the other peoples of the world. And that is one reason why China and Japan are being given the chance to be important players in the New World Order. I'm sure the vast resources that they have available to them in terms of money has a lot to do with that as well, if not all to do with it. The powerful Li family in Hong Kong is part of the Illuminati. This family remains a good public relations, and they are philanthropists. Billionaire Li Ka-shing donated money to create a university in Shantou in South China. The cost of the university and its teaching hospital were reported to be $85 million US. And this was in the July 13th, 92 issue of Fortune magazine. Li Ka-shing is worth $4 billion US. Another article notes that he made Hong Kong dollars worth of 13.4 billion in Hong Kong dollars from real estate sales alone. Li Ka-shing has lived in the same house on a hill in Hong Kong for 30 years. He had no formal school training. He is self-taught. His sons have been well educated, however, with Victor, who graduated from Stanford and became an engineer. And then his other son, Richard, majored in computer science and is running Star TV in Hong Kong. Other wealthy friends of Li Ka-shing get together with him regularly to play poker. Now, Li Ka-shing is the chairman and chief executive of his 4 big companies in Hong Kong, and he hires both Chinese and Western executives for the day-to-day management of these companies. Simon Murray, a Dalton graduate who served in the French Foreign Legion, is one of Li's trusted managers. Murray has worked for Jardine Matheson, a business owned by one of the Committee of 300. Li has built global alliances with British companies and has part of Pearson, a British holding company, which in turn has interests in Lazard banking arms in New York, London, and other parts. As you can see, Li Ka-shing is doing business with the big boys of international banking. Li also has joint ventures with MTV, AT&T, Motorola, Time Warner, and Li's Star TV broadcasts 5 channels to viewers from Israel to Indonesia. The programming comes from the BBC News and MTV and some minor partners. He bought the Expo 86 site in Vancouver, which is 1/16 of downtown Vancouver. 27% of Vancouver's 560,000 citizens are of Chinese descent, and Vancouver is a triad stronghold. The Bank of East Asia is run by Lee Kwok Po, also known as David Lee. Bank of East Asia has gone into partnerships with such Illuminati-connected companies as G. Warburg. Lee Kwok Po also serves in the Hong Kong legislature as a counselor who represents the banking community. He is also vice chairman of the committee drawing up the future Chinese administrative region that Hong Kong will soon become. He was chosen for this position by the Red Chinese because he was chosen by the Chinese mainly because of his family background. The extended Lee family, which most of its members hold British passports, is one of the territory's rich and influential old families. Now, it was Li Mi who started up the poppy fields to produce drugs that would be marketed by the other top Illuminati families. And this was not by chance, because Li began the whole affair. It was calculated. It was a calculated event by the Illuminati, who have made millions running drugs for centuries. In the 1960s, another Li took over after Li Mi died, and his name was Li Wen Han. The elite made room for the Lees to open the Long Island Commercial Bank for business on Long Island. After Bush was ambassador to China, Carter selected Sixth Degree Pilgrim Society member Thomas S. Gates to represent the U.S. to China. David Rockefeller gave his okay to the selection of Gates, and Gates was transferred directly from working on the board of J.P. Morgan and Company to Peking. The Illuminati's banks have been lining up over the years making loans to Red China. The Lee family in Hong Kong is part of the satanic hierarchy and works hand in glove with the British and American elite. They also help run the triads, and whether or not the Lees in Hong Kong are related by the Red Chinese Lees who run China, I do not know. But it is clear that the Lees run Red China and also Singapore. Both these countries work hand in hand with the satanic Illuminati hierarchy, so it makes me kind of suspicious as to whether or not their leaders are part of this hierarchy as well. If the Lees do consider themselves blood relatives, based on what I told you before, the customary feeling among Chinese that if they share the same surname, then they must be related, then I would suspect that the Lee family as a whole are probably the biggest, most powerful Illuminati bloodline of worldwide importance. And there's more, but this is what I've been able to come up with thus far on the Lees. And it's quite a bit, so I thank you. I thank you for indulging me in these presentations. Holy Spirit, thank you for leading me to research these bloodlines and to share them with the people. It is a gift to be able to be in your service, Lord, and I thank you for the gift. I thank you for the assignment. I thank you for the subscribers, Lord. And more and most importantly, I thank you for the magnificence that you have done in my life. In Jesus' mighty name.